Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's forum regarding the condition and care of the sanctuary organ. I want to thank you for taking your time on a Saturday morning to come out and get some information. We look forward to your input and comments. There's a brief agenda over on the table where Emily is if you need one. There are also pencils if you want to take notes. Before we get started, I just want to give you a brief overview of the capital campaign and the campaign committee. I'm Dave Henshaw, the campaign chair, and I want to thank the members of the steering committee, Janet and Louis Hardy, the co-chairs of the inspiration team, Mitzi Silverstein, who is chair of the information team, Phil and Julianne Golden, who couldn't be here today because they're traveling out of the country. They are co-chairs of the response team, and Lee Ann and Dan Meckley and Lauren Saldana, who are co-chairs of the events team, who work to make sure these and the other events we have across the campaign go well. And of course, special thanks to Emily, who's really running everything. I'm just up here because for some reason. But yes, Emily's running the campaign, and we're glad to have her expertise and guidance. So right now, just to give you a little overview about the way the campaign works, we're in the part of the campaign where we're actually discerning the needs. So we're not out here asking money for money today because we don't know exactly what we want to do yet. To be sure, we will figure that out before we come to you with the ask. Okay, so it's not let's get the money and then figure out what to do with it. It will be the other way around. So in addition to getting input from the Congregation Council, property team, EECC, and other groups around the church, which is an ongoing task, we wanted to solicit input from the congregation as a whole. And the primary way we're going to do that are through these information forums. Today is all about the church organ. In about 3 weeks or so, on October 22nd after worship, we'll have another forum on the building and grounds, and we'll actually have kind of a walkthrough. We'll talk about things that the property team and other leadership groups in the congregation have said they believe need to be done. We'll also get your input and ideas on what makes sense. After all that, we'll evaluate the input, and we'll seek at least estimates, if not formal bids for work. We'll put all that together, prioritize it, evaluate it, prioritize it, and then that'll all go on this fall. And after the first of the year, we'll actually come to you with our list. This is what we believe the priorities ought to be. Here's what we think it's going to cost to get this done, and we'll ask you for your cooperation and involvement in the campaign as a whole. So today, again, we're going to focus on the organ. Feel free to ask questions, give us your comments, and then throughout the campaign, if you have questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, feel free to contact me, Emily, Pastor Russell, and give us your input, because we certainly do want your input today and throughout. So thank you for coming out, and I'll turn it over to Pastor Russell, who will lead us in prayer and get us started.
Sure. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Good and gracious God, throughout the years you have gathered your people together in worship to sing your praises. We give you thanks for the glad and generous hearts of your people, for musicians that help us to sing your praises with heart, mind, voice, skills, and talents that are even too numerous for us to count. Bless this time together. Send your Spirit and give us all a sense of your discernment so that your will would be done. and that you would help us to continue to grow, connect, and serve. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so thanks, Dave, for that wonderful introduction, and thanks to folks for helping to make today happen. I do want to encourage you. I'm going to certainly have some bits and pieces and some information. I've talked with several different people. For instance, I'm going to single out Kathleen Tucker here for a minute. Kathleen is probably the one person in this room who has the most sense of history and knows the most about the ins and outs of Epiphany's organ. And so I've encouraged her, and I want to encourage y'all as well too along the way, because I'm only 5 years a part of your history here at Epiphany. And so if there are things that I get wrong from the stuff that I've gleaned, or if there are questions that you have or things that you feel like you want to add in there, please feel free to do so along the way. So come with me in your mind to the hallway outside of Mickey's office over there, and you will see two big, large pieces of paper that are there. The first one was signed on February 25th, 1962. And Jim Lippard, what was that? I asked him that as he eating his bucket. That's our charter. And so we had folks that signed that charter. And then there's a second piece of paper that's there that was from 1975 or 6. I can't remember which one. And Kathleen, do you know which one that is?
I'm not sure which one that's.
That was when we dedicated the sanctuary.
Sanctuary, yes.
And so Pastor Paul was here when that happened. Those of you that have a long history here will probably remember when we were way down at the other end of the building in what is now the EECC cafeteria and in that area. When the church was building the sanctuary in the mid-70s, one of the choices that we had to make as a congregation was around an organ. And so that is no small conversation, obviously. That's why you're here this morning. And it wasn't a small conversation in the 1970s as well. So Epiphany had two choices, either a digital organ or a pipe organ, and they chose a pipe organ. They went with a builder out of Knoxville, Tennessee by the name of Joe Lee. Mr. Lee died about 4 years ago or so, and was based out of Knoxville and was responsible for servicing a ton of organs throughout North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. He apparently had a connection with Pastor Paul.
Yes, he did.
Through his previous congregation in the Statesville area. Mr. Lee was just starting out when he installed this organ in 1977, okay? And so the original Epiphany organ is from the Lee Organ Company, and it is opus number 1. Opus number 1. So we set that up and helped to make that happen for him to keep things going. I don't know how many organs he built throughout the Southeast. I do know that he built at least 9, okay? Because number 1's here. Number 2 is at Patrick's brother's church over in Apex or Cary.
Cary, I think.
Yeah.
And has already had to be completely rebuilt.
Correct.
Yeah.
Number 9 was at Emmanuel Lutheran in West Columbia, where I served for 4 years. So I know that there are at least 9 that are out there. With that said, we also know from the history that there were issues with the installation. Let me just kind of run through what the issues are that I've known throughout the years. Those of you that have ever built a home before will know that A lot of times the drawings that get produced by the architect and the draftsman might be off in little bits and pieces that are there. In the organ world, several inches or even a couple inches can make a very big difference. One of the things that Patrick will talk about is that there's a pipe loft that's there and there's a ladder, and if you're especially daring, you can go up there and see what's up there. But trust me when I say this, the pipes are all squished in there very tightly. And so what an organ builder has to do is he or she has to take the space that that's given on the plans, especially when it's new construction like it was in the 70s, and they have to design an instrument with all those pipes that go in there and to make it fit. Well, when Epiphany Sanctuary was built, the pipe loft area was off by 15 inches on each side, which means that he had a lot less space to work with from the very beginning. And it also meant that I'm about to go on a trip next week, imagine those times when you're trying to cram extra things into a suitcase to make it fit and sort of put your arm into it to kind of make it close. What Mr. Lee had to do kind of on the fly with his first instrument that he had ever built was to kind of make it all work and come together with 15 less inches on each side with a little bit over a foot that's there. There's always budget issues in congregations, so that's always an issue that's there. There's also a balance issue, and I want to try and not get too technical with things, but I want us to imagine that we are watching the NC State game last night. Sorry, Lewis. The NC State lost, for those of you that are State fans last night.
On with what you're
All right, so
I was enjoying this a minute.
imagine on the football field, you've got different sides. You've got offense, you've got defense, and you've got special teams. So think about that in a metaphorical sort of way with the organ. In the organ, the technical term for that are divisions that are there. Okay, one's called the great, one's called the swell. Anyway, there are different divisions, like there are different parts of a football team: the offense, the defense, and other things like that. When our organ was installed in the 70s, the voicing, the amount of air that was going through on the different divisions that were there was unequal. So imagine like this. Imagine that I'm trying to talk, and when I'm talking, sometimes it'll be really, really loud, but when I'm trying to talk normally like this, it comes out this way. And they're not in balance, which is not a great thing for an organ. Did I get that halfway? Okay. Thank you. And so it's a problem when they play together, because when all the different tones and colors come together, some of the tones are a lot louder or a lot softer than others, and it makes it very complicated, even when you have talented musicians like we do in Kathleen and Patrick here that can do all sorts of things with that. Some of the other voices, in other words, the different types of sounds that are there on the organ were pipes that really didn't work that well with our space. And then there was one other issue that was a known significant problem, and that has to do with the wiring. We're going to go into the sanctuary in a little bit, and you'll see that the organ top is going to be off. And you can look on the inside of the organ, and underneath the very top of that, the wiring looks like a rat's nest. Now, I am not an electrician, We can call Mike Spain and have him take a look at some of that. But I know enough to know that when you see wiring like that that is sort of woven and tangled together, that's a problem. And that's especially a problem with an organ, because over time there needs to be maintenance on things. And so if something isn't completely working with one of the voices, with part of the organ, what an organ repair person will have to do is to isolate which one of those wires is a problem. Well, if it's not organized well, it makes it impossible to sort of untangle that and to figure out where the issue is and to repair it. There also was the cotton-covered wiring that we've talked about as well too, that I've mentioned. And so what happens with cotton-covered wiring is that over time it disintegrates and it leaves sort of a bare wire. Now it's low voltage wire, so it's not like things are going to go immediately, but it is a major code violation. And thank you, Jesus, that the fire marshal has never said, I want to go up in that pipe loft and see what's there. That is a sign of God's grace, and I'm very serious about that. Because if the fire marshal were to head up there and take a look at the wiring and to take a look at everything that's there, she or he would say, no. So, fast forward, we're in the late 70s, fast forward to 1999. That was when I think this space was built, the ECC classrooms, and we did a sanctuary renovation here at the church. I see some heads nodding, so I think I got my times right. In July of 1999, as we were doing all of the construction here at the church and doing the sanctuary renovation, we took out all of the organ pipes. And so one of the things that was discovered as we were taking out the organ pipes, and Robert Walters is the one apparently who discovered this, is that as they were taking the pipes out, he noticed that the back part of the organ cabinet that's there, where all the pipes were, was starting to come up a little bit. And so what happened is that the steel beams that sort of were the foundation for that weren't really attached to any part of the structure. Here again, I was a history major in college, but I know that that's probably not a good thing. So what wound up happening was that we worked on the structure. That's repaired. The pipes were sent out and worked on. Some of the issues that were identified in the installation were attempted to be worked on, but a lot of the issues that have been a part of the problem since the organ was installed in the 70s still haven't been completely fixed, even after the work that we did in '99. So then we come to 2015, and the digital part of the organ was added, all right? And a guy by the name of Mark Anderson out of Greenville, North Carolina, had developed this new system that was installed in the sanctuary. And unfortunately, what happened is that the digital part had some significant problems with the installation and it working for basically since we've gotten the thing.
Right, this is our second
Yes.
digital.
Right. And the first digital engine system that we got in 2015 was just completely unsatisfactory, and so we sent that back and
The new and improved.
for new and improved version.
Which came back even worse.
Yes. So basically for the last almost 3 years now, the 2.5+ years, we have not used the digital part of the organ at Epiphany, just because it has been nothing but problematic, and just very aggravating. And not only that, the digital part, Patrick, I'm gonna ask you to show them the presets in between the consoles. So there are different presets for organist, because you gotta move quick if you're adding different pieces. Those digital, or the presets, were not put in with the digital stops. So Patrick or Kathleen would be playing something and they want to add in some of the digital stops, and they got to go tick, 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 tick. And then when they're done with that, they got to act just as quickly and go off, 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 off. Whereas, the technology has been around for a long time to just sort of go push a button and boom, I got this combination of stops that are there. All of which is to say this: the issues that Epiphany has had really since the mid-70s aren't normal for a church to go through. In my previous congregation, we did an organ transplant from a congregation that closed up in Midland, Texas. We were doing a major renovation of our sanctuary. The problem there, not that you asked, but the problem there is that the pipes that we had were such poor quality that literally the bottom was getting crushed like an aluminum can.
Which is called toe collapse, and which we are also experiencing here.
Well, there you go. So, anyway, we did an organ transplant. That involves some significant renovations that are there, and it turned into a very long renovation process. When a congregation goes through an installation of an organ in a new space, or they're installing or renovating an organ, it normally works like this. You've got, the planning that goes into all of that. You've got kind of the design and the build and the installation. The installation can take, a couple months to figure out. And then once the fine tuning is sort of set, you're done. You have maintenance that you need to do, kind of like with your car, where you've got to get oil changes and replace the air filter and all that sort of stuff. But you're not doing continual repairs for years upon years. That's what our history has been here at Epiphany. And so what wound up happening was that in 2020, we brought in 3 organ builders to assess the condition of our instrument. And the wiring issue that I talked about, that we knew about since the installation basically, was identified as a major issue. The thing that sort of caused me to have my heart skip a beat was that at least one of the organ builders said to us very bluntly, I refuse to ever do any sort of repairs on this instrument because of the wiring. Because if, God forbid, there was a short in the wiring or something like that, they would not want to be held liable for something like that. And so at that point, that was one of those moments where it was like, oh. Combine that with some of the ongoing condition issues that have been there from the beginning, and it felt like we needed to have a conversation as a congregation about what to do. So let me just wrap up what I'm talking about with all of this. First of all, despite the fact that I'm giving you a lot of bad news and just kind of telling you what's going on, I want to end with talking about this from a note of thankfulness. If you go back to July of 1999, or in the 1970s when we installed the organ, I've heard stories of people that were spending Saturday mornings or other periods of time coming up here and working on things and trying to make things happen here. That tells me that we have been a congregation that has long been committed to having a high-quality worship and music program here at Epiphany. That's a part of our DNA here at Epiphany. And that has happened because y'all have come up here and taken down pipes from the pipe loft. You've said, hey, something's not right with the structure back there. Or folks taking time to sort of figure things out and to make things work. I am very, very thankful that that has been a part of our congregation's history. And I want to celebrate that. Now, with all of that said, it feels like, to me, that we're at a point where we are very much in need of having some help from the outside. Because we've got a number of issues that have been going on for quite a long period of time. And I don't want to be at a point where we continually kick the can down the road. It feels like now is the time for us to address it. Churches, not just Epiphany, I see a couple retired pastors in the room. Churches are good at kicking the can down the road in little and big ways. And sometimes that's okay to do. But in this instance, with something this critical in our life together, we need to do something about it. We can't just let this ride, because it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse as time goes on. So, with all of that, what I want us to do is to actually go into the sanctuary. I want to invite you to leave your coffee and your food and drinks here in the fellowship hall. And we're going to head over to the sanctuary. I know you have your normal spots where you sit. I'm going to ask you to do something different. And to this part will be comfortable for you Lutherans, because you're going to sit towards the back of the center section, in the back, or in the choir area. And what we're going to do is have Patrick kind of walk us through some stuff and just to have a conversation with that. Once we get through with Patrick's presentation, we'll have a coffee break, bathroom break, and then we're going to come back and process some of what we heard, and then talk about the various options that have been discussed, as well as the proposal that we're putting forward. So, leave your food and drinks here, and let's go over to the sanctuary, please. Thanks.